wondered, you're not a doctor, so this is not the right kind of question to ask. But
the doctor's in the house.
Well, in your opinion, do you think there would have been a great difference in those composers if they had access to modern antipsychotics and or whatever else kind of medication, pharmacology, pharmacological, or I just wonder how that would have affected their work.
Well, Mingus did. And
Mingus did what
he did at a couple of different times in his life. He was given huge doses of Thorazine and other early tricyclics for a long period of time, and it just made him into a zombie. But he was in a bad way. I mean, he was very ill and he was suicidal. I mean, he needed help, but he was really overdrugged. But I steer clear of all of that because I'm really not qualified.
No, that's
so I intentionally steer clear of it because it's not my field. My interest was more at looking at these other triangular aspects of the primary relationships, the formative experiences and culture, to see how those three things play into, and I think they do. I think there are all kinds of interesting connections you can draw without having to get into pharmacology. So I don't know.
So you had a wealth of sources to deal with beyond the pharmacology. Right. Other questions, comments, observations? Yeah, Ms. Valike.
You're a musician first, huh?
Yes.
Yes. And your first comment was that you were studying the life of the people and that you were trying to express what you feel. So it just reminded me a little bit that as an actor, we're getting to the character to really deliver the character through the music. This time.
That's essential, huh?
Yes.
Method acting. Some actors.
Yes. And the other thing is that we were talking about what promotes or provokes the creativity in someone is the culture, like the culture, or the culture that one person acquires also, and also the personality and the intelligence also. When we talk about the intelligence, it's there and at different levels.
Of course, yeah.
So, and I suspect, I don't know, you probably have an opinion on that. Do they feed each other on equal basis, or is it different for every single individual?
You have to look at each individual. I mean, I think of Elgar, for example, and he because of his decision to marry well above his status in life, he put himself in a situation where he had to constantly be producing excellent work all the time. It was really incumbent upon. It was expected of him culturally, and more so as the years went on. And he became Sir Edward Elgar, and then his wife was Lady Elgar. These people were traveling in very sophisticated circles. A schleppy little musician would not do. He had to really had to rise to occasions that, had he married someone else, I don't think he would have put himself under that kind of pressure. In a way, it seemed a bit against his character. And yet, the interesting thing is, because he was constantly working and feeling inadequate and struggling with his work and his moods as a result of that, but continuing to work and continuing to push through these things, he found that he could, escape into music, where he then was his more genuine self. And because it was a funny push and pull thing. He got himself into a situation where he had to write too much damn music, for his own comfort. But because he kept doing it, he kept escaping into music where he felt better, and where he could contact who he really was as a man and an artist. And so he was able to get that relief, to experience that relief from when it was finally going well. Not when it wasn't going well, but when his composing, when he would break through his mental blocks and his writer's block, and the writing was finally flowing and going well, then he was his best self. So it was interesting how he, and all of them in a certain sense, got themselves into situations where their work was forced out of them and compromised, and yet they wrote this great music because of many of these interpersonal decisions that they made.
Other questions, comments, observations? Please.
I'm just interested, quick bit of background. How did you get into classical music? What was your
really
formative
quickly,
experience?
my father's a composer.
Okay.
And so I grew up with all kinds of music in the house. And the cello chose me.
Okay, did you try other instruments?
The cello chose me, and I wouldn't have betrayed my cello.
And did you grow up listening to classical music predominantly?
Everything, jazz, a lot of jazz. A lot of jazz, a lot of modern music, contemporary music, modern classical music, that is. Swing bands, jazz, and classical music, opera, everything. Yeah.
I'm interested in hearing how it chose you, when, how, just the details of it, if you feel like sharing it.
Well, it's when I had the opportunity finally to pick it. 9, I was late. That's
you had played
late.
Other instruments first, or?
No, I didn't. No.
Okay,
No, but it was sort of, finally, I wanted to play an instrument sooner, but my parents wanted me to climb trees and be a tom girl, be normal. So much to my chagrin. So finally, when I was 9, it was time to choose an instrument, and there I was in the school music room with just all the instruments, and I said, that one.
But that was a visual.
Yeah.
But wait a minute. Did you hear the sound? Did you know the sound of the cello compared to?
Yes,
others?
I knew the sound of the cello. We had a good friend of the family who played the cello.
But how did you relate to the sound of the instrument? Before you chose?
Very, very sensuously.
But when you heard the sound of the cello compared to other instruments, did you respond more to the cello than other instruments? Because you said it clicked, but that's a visual.
I responded to other instruments as well when I heard
well.
Them. Yeah.
So it was when you saw it visually that it really.
I think it was the physical instrument itself.
Physical.
And it was a full-size cello.
At 9 years old.
I was 9, and they said, well, I was a big kid. They said, you can handle this full-size cello, and I said, let me have that. And it just fit me. I put my arms around it, and that was it. I didn't look bad. And never another question of what I would do in my life. That was from that moment. Cello.
You knew what you were doing in life when you were 9.
Done. Don't talk to me about anything else. Dad. And they tried.
Yes, Ms. Bates.
Yes, if I could just, on the subject of sound, if I could just add something. I've been deaf for 28 years, and I've recently had a cochlear implant.
Yes, you
and
mentioned
I can now
them.
hear sounds that I haven't heard for years.
Fantastic.
I have a limited association with the cello as a teenager, but I find now that I'm playing CDs of cello music in particular because I can hear the music, but I can hear the sound, and I kind of distinguish between those two things. Sometimes I'm really listening to the sounds, which are absolutely wonderful in and of themselves, and at other times I say, well, but this is music, this is not random sound, it's something else. So the cello is is a wonderful instrument because it has that level of the vibrations.
Yes. Did you feel that?
Yeah.
Did you feel the vibrations on the wooden floor? Did you?
It was wonderful.
Neat. Cool. Because the floor is wood, so I thought maybe that's great. Oh, that's a great story.
So I enjoyed it.
That's an acute observation, the distinction between music and sound, and listening to one and sometimes the other, not necessarily collapsing them into a single phenomenon.
Right, yeah. That's very interesting.
Other questions, comments, remember, the only wrong question is the unasked question. And we're all on the same level playing field here.
Did you ever hear of anybody? No, I'll tell you, I heard the cello when I was 25. I heard Kodai's sonata for unaccompanied cello, and as soon as I heard it, it was my thing, you know, playing the piano, right? And then I was also told that this is really, I'm made for this instrument, all that kind of stuff. And I could never get beyond a certain level because who knows what. But it doesn't leave me playing the guitar. I'm studying guitar right now. But even though I'm 64, I say before I die, I have to go back to the cello. But did you ever know of anybody who took it or be beginner again at a late age?
We'll talk. We'll talk after class. Yeah, I do have some amateur students, adults.
Do we have other questions? Come on.
Well, I've heard it said that we naturally gravitate towards the instruments that are close to our own vocal range. I just wanted to know what you felt about that. To either play or to listen to.
I think it's something else. I think it's something, for me anyway, something not close to my vocal range, although I have a deeper-ish voice for a woman, I think. Although I'm collaborator soprano. I believe that. I don't know how that happened, but that's my voice type. Anyway, I think it appeals to something more in my heart and my soul. Yeah. The other instruments that do that for me are the French horn and the oboe.
They go and grab you.
Oh yeah. For me, those are the ones.
Very melancholy stuff.
Yeah.
I have a technical question.
Sure.
Actually. The cello, as string instruments generally do, you can play the same note on different strings. And about the question of sound, of course, the color of the sound will be very different whether you choose to play it on one or the other.
Yeah.
Is that written, or is that the choice of the cellist?
Choice of the cellist. Yeah. Almost always. Some contemporary composers will get very, very specific about that. But if you see Dvorak and cello concerto, it's there on your fingerings. It's all up to you.
That's your choice.
Yeah, your ear for color and how much technique you actually have as well.
Yeah, sometimes it's impossible, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.